African leaders, several European leaders, and heads of international organizations are meeting in France for a summit on the revival of the African economies. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Africa24, first Africa's global channel. I'm Marie-Raphaël Antolo, your host. Within the framework of the Summit of Financing African Economies held in France, several African ministers of finance, as well as the executive secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, are joining us in a high dialogue to discuss the different themes addressed throughout the summit. This debate is held virtually and will be run by Africa24 Group. Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, Nigerian Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta, Ghanaian Minister of Finance, Dr. Vera Songwe, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. You are all welcome to this debate.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much indeed.
Dr. Vera Songwe, the continent's GDP had experienced its first recession in 25 years since 2011. The aim of this summit is to put in place financial resources capable of reviving our economies. From Africa's point of view, what is the expected outcome of this summit?
The outcome is, I think, first of all, we want to thank the government of France, President Macron, and his whole team in the finance ministry for working with African ministers of finance and African heads of states to come together and put together the summit. It has been in the works for quite a while and a lot of work has gone into it. The main idea was to see how we can provide more financing for African economies. Africa has been quite resilient to the COVID-19 crisis, but we know that where the crisis has hit the most is in our growth. And so part of the summit is to see how we can provide more financing for African economies to respond to this crisis, but also to start recovering. We see the rest of the world getting vaccinated and beginning to recover. Countries are opening up their economies. Africa must follow pace with that. Otherwise, as the IMF warns, we will have a $435 billion gap of GDP to catch up to the rest of the world. And one cannot have a multiple speed recovery. Africa must continue to recover with the rest of the world. The point of this summit is to see what is needed so that we can do that.
Your vision, Dr. Ahmed?
Well, thank you very much again. I have to join Vera to say thank you to France, but also to G20 on the debt sustainability, service sustainability initiative, on the new approvals for the SDRs, and also on the common framework, and also for this summit. For us in Nigeria, we think that the current African development financing is inadequate, and that lack of funds is contributing to inhibiting the growth that we strive to achieve. We need to be able to address poverty. We need to address the level of high level unemployment, yet the resources are very, very limited. So there's a need to review the rules guiding the development financing of African countries. And also in order to recover and to ensure that real growth, a sustainable growth and an inclusive one is achieved, we need to be able to have sufficient liquidity, and we need to be able to address the debt levels that we are now holding within our countries. We hope that at the end of this meeting, that there will be an approval and an authorization for the developed countries to unlend to us from the $650 million recently approved SDRs, at least 25 to 30% to cover the gap, the financing gap that Vera just mentioned. We also hope to be able to attain strengthened partnership with the private sector to be able to grow infrastructure stock in our economies and to be able to invest in vaccine manufacturing.
Your vision, Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta.
Thank you very much, Marie. Thank you for this opportunity. And really, as my colleague said, to thank France for this seminar period that this summit is happening. I think there's just a new sense of multilateralism, which is really positive. and the agreement for the 650 billion of SDRs is a strong signal of a change from 2020 when we began to advocate for these changes. I mean, the issue of strong Africa 15 years with now a sudden spike in the deficit moving from about 4% to nearly 9%, and our estimated debt levels moving from 57% of GDP to close to 70% in 2020, really in jeopardy of debt sustainability. And that's the issue that my colleagues are addressing. How do we get immediate liquidity? And then more importantly, to examine this whole global financial architecture, realizing that it's really not fit for purpose for the future, and who are going to be a time for really ensure that from this, we are going to have a more even growth going forward. I think we all have gone through three signals that are very disturbing. The West's ability to generate over 13 trillion to save their people and put a stimulus in the economy. And then secondly, this very embarrassing situation of vaccine nationalism, where maybe 1.4 billion doses have been administered worldwide, mostly in the West, and Africa is somewhere close to under 2% of our population, meaning 20 million doses is what we're talking about. So I think this offers an opportunity to be plain speaking, to be bold about it, and realize that without Africa having the resources to tackle these fundamental issues, the world will not be a safe place. We all, to be safe, everybody has to be vaccinated.
Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed.
In the end, we are looking for a new deal of just restructuring the global financial architecture and saying that since Bretton Woods in 1944, some 75 years ago, things have changed markedly, and it is time now for a tectonic shift in all of that.
Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, how did your country address the problems faced during this crisis exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and how did it affect the national economy?
Well, Marie, like many countries in the world, Nigeria is experiencing its fair share of the double shocks of the health as well as the economic impacts of COVID-19. But in addition to the pandemic, Nigeria is also on the front lines to prevent secondary impact of this shock on our most vulnerable citizens and on our communities. We are trying and working very hard to build back better in a manner that is inclusive as well as sustainable. We have prioritized COVID-19 response in a stimulus package that has been costed at 2.3 trillion naira. That's an equivalent of $6.4 billion to tackle the multiple challenges that COVID-19 brought on us. For Nigeria, the government adopted an accommodative monetary and expansionary fiscal policy. We had to pass a law, the Finance Act, that enabled us to relieve small companies of paying company income tax for a short period, and also reduce the rate of tax from medium-sized companies from 30% to 20%. We also relieved small businesses from paying education tax. We extended loan moratorium on principal as well as interest to subnational governments. That's what we call the states. And also the financial sector did the same for businesses that came up and requested for such assistance. We put in place a credit facility, 50 billion naira by the Central Bank of Nigeria for small, medium businesses and for households to cushion the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. We amended Appropriation Act, we amended our medium-term expenditure framework and deferred expenditure that were not vital to give us space to, and it enabled us to invest very significantly in the health sector as well as in social protection.
Your vision, Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta?
I think, I mean, I think all of us so we did that, and really all of the issues that Minister Zainab in terms of intervening, because the president was very clear, had a statement that said, you know, always physics can bring.
Doctor,
Yes.
are you getting me?
Yes, I can hear you, Mary.
In this summit, other avenues include the debt relief by bringing together both public and private creditors. What is the effectiveness and impact of this mechanism?
We do hope that at the end of the summit, we'll be able to discuss things around debt cancellation and debt restructuring, and also being able to access finance, not just for sovereign governments, but also for the private sector to enable us invest adequately within the country. We need to mobilize resources. Additional resources are required for our countries. And to do so, we must be able to fund the international finance institutions that are the ones that will be able to give us funding that is low cost on concessionary terms. We need to be able to extend such support to the private sector. We need to be able to mobilize investments, people that will actually come in, bring their resources, invest in our countries to stay, not short-term investors that will come and go. Those are useful, but we would really want investors that will come and build factories and build businesses and stay within our economies. We are working on comprehensive reforms. All of our countries are doing that to enhance transparency and accountability in public expenditure. And we seek to use this conference to ask for more support to be extended to us in terms of energy transition, to make sure that we're able to invest in the green economy.
I don't know, Maria, am I back? Can you hear me now?
Okay, Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta, what is your view? What is your take on what Dr. Ahmed is just from saying?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we are, you know, on the same page, except that the scale of Nigeria is much larger. But essentially, we have a program called the Ghana Cares Program, in which our interventions to the private sector and the poor were very clear. At the end of the day, we have about 650,000 micro and small businesses that we supported. And then we put together a program of recovery, which was equivalent to a quarter of our GDP, to be financed 30% by government and 70% by the private sector. And a new PPP bill to ensure that we facilitate foreign investment. And so those are now being effected, and we expect that to ensure that we get through the recovery phase and intervene more as an entrepreneurial state than just allowing only the private sector, because we have to de-risk their entry to ensure that we build infrastructure and organizational capacity for the future.
Well, Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, does Africa really take lessons based on the thorough performance analysis of past debt relief initiatives and efforts to facilitate more financing for the continent?
Well, debt relief is important and is a very beneficial, potentially very beneficial tool. And it is important to take debt relief into account when you're asking for debt relief to be provided. It's important to take into account sovereign debt borrowing rates, as well as covenants that already exist from borrowings that we have undertaken, especially, for example, in the Eurobonds. The DSSI extended by the G20 is highly appreciated, and it is welcome. But we solicit for a more sustainable solution like debt relief and debt cancellation, in view of the volatility of our economies, especially for the small, low-income countries, they would benefit from debt relief. But for some of our countries, what we are asking for is restructuring of the debts to give us longer tenor repayment periods and provide us the fiscal relief that we need. There is this offer of the DSSI to eligible countries in 2020, which is extended to 2021. Nigeria was not able to take advantage of that offer because of the relatively small size of the Nigerians' loans from bilateral partners like China, India, Germany, and France. So we didn't take it also because we were concerned about the uncertainty that it was bringing in terms of the relief on issues such as our rating and also in relation to the covenants that we have on existing debt. Debt relief is beneficial, would be beneficial for Nigeria if can be extended to loans that we have taken under multilateral institutions, which at the moment forms about 53% of Nigeria's external debt of $33.3 billion US.
Your judgment, Mr. Ken Oforiatta.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maria. I think debt relief and debt restructuring usually get people's back up. The question really for the world is how do we face the reality of the components or profile of the debt that Africa has. And given the correlation in the increase of our debt exposure to the pandemic, clearly it's not an issue of moral hazard. You know, the question is sustainability and avoiding liquidity turning into insolvency, which may be more chaotic and more expensive. So I think there has to be some real deep thought about that, you know, how to bundle it, how to work with it, how to get the private sector on the side. You know, after all, the reason for the because things in 1944 were not as they should be. There was a reason for the Marshall Plan because of the challenges that the world has. So I think we can certainly, in good faith, look at that as to confront our own humanity as people, also realizing by 2050, a quarter of the world's population will be on our continent, and we will have maybe 60% of the youth. Now we have to guard against chaos and look at a way in which that sort of prosperity. But I think the power is now to examine that the combination of the SDRs, of finding different mechanisms to inject the type of capital that will make us more productive, even looking at illicit financial flows, which are mostly commercial, and go to the West and stymie that. Digitalization, currently Africa has about 30 billion of tax revenues. We have about now that doubling to 20 gives us almost $1 trillion that can support our infrastructure. A very holistic realization for Africa.
Dr. Vera Songwe, please, can you give us a statement on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in Africa globally?
Listen, I think, as we all know, Africa was growing at 3.2% before the crisis. With the COVID-19, our growth dropped to almost negative 2.8. We're hoping that we can get out of it. It has, I think, dashed the hopes of achieving the 2030 objectives and the Africa 2063, the Africa we want. However, I think that Africa has shown some resilience. We hope that maybe in some areas, particularly areas of ICT, maybe energy as well, access to clean water, COVID has shown that Africa needs to do more in these areas, particularly in the area of ICT, where, you know, many girls are now dropping out of schools because they don't have access to education. Early marriages are beginning to happen. We hope that, we can find ways of resolving this crisis. I'm sure Minister Zainab has talked about all the work that is being done in terms of social protection in Nigeria, and of course in Ghana, the support to the nurses. And so I think it has brought to the fore the importance of women in our societies, and hopefully that we will not forget that after this pandemic. I think one very important part of the pandemic has been the importance of women, but also the importance of ICT and how we can use ICT to fast track both access to health, access to education. Education is the fastest way we know to increase revenues and get people out of poverty. And so we hope that, there has been a huge macroeconomic crisis, but we also signed, let's not forget, on January 1, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which essentially was meant to, link African economies much better, much stronger. The Secretariat, of course, is in Ghana. And we hope that, we've seen a little bit the glut in the production of vaccines as we work harder to produce more vaccines on the continent. Hopefully we can benefit again from the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement to create, continental supply chains from Nigeria to Ghana to Kenya to South Africa to Senegal to Cameroon, why not? And that will be able to produce more pharmaceutical products on the continent.
Dr. Vera Songwe, what are the requirements of African leaders from the summit taking place in France on the refunding of African economies?
I don't know whether there are requirements. I'm sure that this is what Minister Zainab and Minister Kenoforiata have spoken about. I think it's a question of how we can collaborate better and how we can bring, our collective intellectual experience and history to bear on finding ways of getting out of this crisis by creating, a new financial architecture that allows us to respond as quickly. We are a year and a half into the crisis and we're still thinking of how to respond. I think that clearly shows the limits of the existing structure. Some things have been done. We've gotten the debt service suspension initiative. There is now a common framework to help restructure debt that has been put in place, but all of this is coming too slowly. And I think almost a little bit too late for many African countries. When you think that the advanced economies have spent 20% of GDP, or somewhere in the order of $15 to $20 trillion immediately to support their economies, I think the conversations around the continent are coming too slowly. And so part of this conversation in Paris is to see how, first of all, we respond to this crisis, but ensure that next time if there's another crisis, we have a different architecture for response.
We are through with our debate. Dr. Ahmed, how can our leading channel, Africa24, help you better promote your country's vision as well as Africa's vision on all the mentioned challenges?
That's an interesting one, Marie. Africa24 should help to promote the achievements that we have made in our various countries and also within the region in addressing the present economic challenge that has imposed by COVID-19. I do hope that you can consider developing a documentary, something that you might want to call Africa Building Back Better and Greener. It wouldn't be a bad idea if you do something like that. And Vera is here, maybe she will push for that as well.
Your feelings, Mr. Kenoforiata?
I think really just to thank you for this opportunity. And in my view, we seem to have a space that we should exploit positively, and I think you can help really with that. Looking at history and Winston Churchill's statement. And foolish to disguise the gravity of the hour where we are. Our task is not only to win the battle, but to win the war. So if you can help promote and reduce battle, ensure that we support a new recapitalization of a Marshall or Merkel or a Macron plan, whatever the new deal is going to be, and to really acknowledge our common humanity to ensure that we have we're experiencing now. That would be great. So we look forward to your support in all.
Thank you all for being present. Dr.
you.
Zaina,
Thank you very much for having us.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mary. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to your promoting Africa in a strong way.
I remember to do that documentary.
And I will work together.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks, Minister Khan. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Zainab. Bye for now.